don't know what it's like in the US, but certainly in UK, if you walk into any dental practice, there is sugar everywhere. And it's consumed probably even more highly amongst dental professionals than it is the public. So they're up in their staff room eating donuts, and then they go down into their little clinics and they sit there and they lecture patients about quitting sugar. The sugar industry invent names for sugar every year to keep the public confused. There's now about 70 different names for sugar. When we say to people, oh, you need to quit sugar, we have no idea what's going on in their lives. And we don't know when they go home. Like, I'm going to quit, I want to quit, and then they get home and this person who is living there is a feeder, and they don't want them to quit, because if I can't quit, you're not going to quit.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists, an Endeavor Business Media production. This is episode number 393. My name is Andrew Johnston, and thank you so much for letting us be a part of your day. You all are in for a good show today. We just recorded this on actually last Saturday at RDH Under One Roof with Tim Ives. Tim is a dental hygienist from the UK. And actually, he's been on the podcast before, but I think it's been a little bit of time. So a quick background with him. He started his career as a dental assistant and then moved into dental hygiene in the British Royal Air Force, where he served for 22 years. He's lived all over the world. He has seen so many things. The thing I probably appreciate the most about him is that he has a curious mind. And I think that has definitely served him well. Maybe on another show, I will kind of out him for some of the questions that he's asked me that really he stumped me twice. It's been interesting, like his line of questioning. He should actually probably be the host of this show because he just has such a way of thinking about the world. He's incredibly generous with his time, his connections. In fact, when we went to Europerio in Amsterdam, I think it was in 2018, he was just a gracious host to Michelle, my wife, and I. He showed us around the city. He helped us with a place to stay. And there's just so much more I could say about him, but I think you probably could feel by now how much I truly appreciate this man and how grateful I am that he came back on the show. He has a really powerful message today about sugar that I know is going to be really important to you as well. I think we all think we know how bad sugar is for us, but in this episode, Tim relates some really interesting findings that he and some of his colleagues have uncovered. And this is an episode for your patients too. So maybe if you wanted to turn it on in the operatory and let people hear it, because this could really be a tool that you use for behavior change. Now, let's get back to RDH Under One Roof. We had the most amazing time at Under One Roof. And thank you so much for everyone who came up and gave me a hug and let me know that you listened to the show. It's been interesting that both ADHA and RDH Under One Roof, both conferences, I feel like you all came up and just, said something nice to me. And I really, really, really appreciate that. To the listener who told me, this almost a direct quote, she said, I hope you don't think it's weird. And also she said it in kind of like a low voice, like she didn't want anyone else to hear. So it made it a little bit weird. But you come to bed with me every night. I will tell you what, you made me laugh so hard. And probably it's one of those things that I will be telling that story for so many years to come. So thank you for being awkward enough to do that. I loved it. It was the best thing ever. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I also want to thank those of you who were in the DSO panel with us. So for the rest of you who weren't there, I had asked, the audience kind of at the very beginning if anyone had listened to the podcast, not because, I was trying to plug the podcast, but it's just the panelists had all been on there. I wanted to give them an opportunity to go back and listen to those panelists if they were interested in what they were saying today or on that day. And probably half of the group that was there raised their hand. And that super surprised me because we've done those polls before and it's never half of a room. So I was really excited. You guys are such great supports to me. It means so much. Josie Sewell, gosh, I can't say enough nice things about her. She came on for the first hour. So this was a 2-hour course. She did the first hour and really set the stage. And then for the second hour, we had Tommy Tipton, Trish Keena, and Misty Mattingly doing a panel discussion, answering questions that I had prepared, but also answering questions that the audience had come up with just then. I got so much great feedback about how well they did. I just can't thank any of you guys enough. So thank you if you're listening. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you want to know more about each one of them individually, they've all been on the podcast, like I mentioned. So Tommy, Trish, Misty, Josie, go find their episodes. You're absolutely going to love them. For next week's episode, I have planned several different options. So one, it might be the ADHA roundtable that I've been teasing for 3 weeks in a row now. It also might be Mary Jensen. Her and I have been talking kind of back and forth because she does these really cool, I guess you call it a mission trip, but it's just a medical mission or medical trip abroad. And they do a lot of cleft palate surgery type things. And I say type things because I'm not exactly sure what they do, but that's what the whole episode's about, right? Is to figure out what they're going to be doing. And so we have that possibly coming up. There also might be a roundtable discussion kind of coming back as not a true callback, but we did have Dr. Ben Holbert on as a new grad dentist. And now I wanted to talk to hygienists who have worked with new grad dentists or recent grad dentists and kind of like answer the other side of the coin, if you will. So looking forward, we also have a ton of other episodes coming up that we recorded at Under One Roof, but also ones that have been really interesting. One that kind of comes to mind, kind of speaking of travel with Mary Jensen, is we have another hygienist who went and worked for 2 years in Oman. That seems to be a topic that everyone's talking about recently. I feel like I've seen several times where people have said, what does it take to work abroad? Or what does it take to work in Australia or the UK or the Middle East or wherever? And so hopefully we'll get some answers. If you are someone who has been looking into this, hopefully we'll get some answers with that. So a lot to look forward to. I'm really excited about it. I just can't believe you guys all listen. I'm very thankful for you all. Please make sure you do hit that subscribe button. Every little download helps. Please share it with your friends. Write a review. Help people find the show. Just thank you. My heart is full of gratitude today. So thank you so much. And with that, I bring you Tim Ives and co-host Brittany Duncan.
A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome everyone into the interview portion of the podcast. So excited. We have Tim Ives on, longtime friend, Tim. Welcome on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. And Brittany's on. Brittany's going to co-host with me.
Yes. Hello, everyone.
Ask all the best questions, of course. Tim, one of the things the thing we want to talk about today is sugar. It's been, I think, one of our first meetings. You told me how terrible and toxic sugar is.
Sure.
And so I was hoping that maybe we could relate to the audience, one, where you started on this journey of anti-sugar, and some of the things that you're seeing that people are just not paying attention to.
Sure. Shall I tell you how it all began?
Yes, please.
So, I'm a tutor and I manage FHEA University, which is an online degree completion program for hygienists. And one of my students wanted to do a project that was based around changing the spiel that he gave patients from brush and floss. And he'd been reading the research on sugar inflammation and thought, do you know what? I'm going to try seeing what happens if I start talking to patients about sugar to see if we get any different results, especially the patients that are not healing like he would want them to. Mm-hmm. So I said, that is an absolutely brilliant idea. Have you ever tried to quit sugar? And he said no. So I said, right, for the next 5 days, what I want you to do is quit sugar. We're talking about added sugar here. Mm-hmm. And he came back the following week, and I said, how'd you get on? He said, I failed. So I said, okay, well, let's try again. So to cut a long story short, this went on for quite a few weeks. Mm-hmm. Eventually, he quit. And jumping forward like a couple of years, I bumped into this guy later on, and he'd lost so much weight. Yeah. And he managed to keep this going. Mm-hmm. So anyway, this got me kind of thinking that, I don't know what it's like in the US, but certainly in UK, if you walk into any dental practice, there is sugar everywhere.
Yes.
And it's consumed probably even more highly amongst dental professionals than it is the public. So they're up in their staff room eating donuts and all that sort of
Having our
stuff.
sugared coffee.
Yeah.
All of
And
that.
then they go down into their little clinics and they sit there and they lecture patients about quitting sugar.
Uh-huh.
And this has always been a bee in my bonnet. And so I thought, having been through this journey with a student, I thought, do you know what? I'm going to see if I can do some research here. So I contacted the British Society of Dental Hygiene and Therapy, see if I get their support. And I managed to start a project, a research project. This is about 3 years ago now. And I got a group of international hygienists together, and with the sole aim of quitting added sugar for a month, 28 days. And the result, we met up online regularly, and the results were really interesting. And what do you think happened? What sort of percentage do you think managed to achieve that challenge?
Well, if you were part of the study, I would say you, or 1% or whatever it was. Before we get into that, though, can you define the added sugar part?
It's a great question. And I left it up to the research group to define it.
Okay.
So one of the first things we did, we defined our rules. Democracy, always a good thing.
Always a good thing.
And this is a group of professionals, dental professionals, stumbling over what the definition of added sugar was.
Sure.
So if they're going to find that difficult, how on earth are the general public going to cope
Exactly.
with it? So eventually we came to some sort of compromise on what is accepted, what's not accepted. But there were a few really interesting things there, because one of them was honey, and obviously it's really unhealthy because it's loaded with fructose. But we decided that honey is a no-go.
Really?
But wild honey you could have, because I don't know if you're aware that when you have a beehive farmed, they have to keep putting sugar in the winter to keep the bees
Feed
alive.
them,
Yeah, so that's added sugar.
I see what you're saying. Yep.
But wild honey, you don't add sugar, the bees go and sort out. So, and obviously you can't get wild honey anyway, so that was fine.
Yeah.
And the other one was wine, alcohol and wine and stuff like that. Luckily, one of the participants had a father who was in the wine industry. And apparently, certain countries aren't allowed to add sugar to their wine, whereas other countries do. And so we went along with, you can have wine providing it's not been added. So like Italian wine, they can't put sugar in there. So they were loving that because they could drink Prosecco.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I have been looking into wine, and this is not a plug, but a company called Dry Farms, and they have very stringent rules on what wine they will accept into their program. And essentially it has to be a dry farm, so no irrigation. So essentially the entire United States is out for its wineries, but also the added sugar. And it was amazing. I think they say there's like 52 additives that wine labels do not add to a bottle because they don't need to list their ingredients.
Correct.
But Dry Farms has started listing their ingredients, and almost all of their bottles are between like 9 and 11% alcohol, which if you go to your regular grocery store and look at the alcohol content, it's way higher because they're adding sugar. And it was just interesting to see that you could have wine with a lower alcohol content if you're not adding sugar.
Sure.
That's interesting.
The other big one was smoothies. So you get a piece of fruit. Obviously fruit's okay, nothing
Right.
added to that.
Right.
You put it in a drink, you whiz it up, so you're then releasing all the sugars. You're not adding anything, but you're releasing them.
Sure.
So we had a real discussion about that, because that is just as unhealthy as any other, because the body can actually get to those sugars immediately.
Never would have thought about that.
And it has the same effect on your insulin. Whereas a piece of fruit is very low in sugar on its own.
Yeah.
For example, if you want to make an orange drink purely out of oranges, you'd need about 20 oranges to get a small glass. Whereas you eat one orange, it's tiny amounts. And your body has to work to get to that sugar. So the insulin spike is very slow. Whiz it up, very quick. So we decided amongst our group that wouldn't be permissible. You could eat fruit, but you couldn't mix it up. So, and then we said, in the end, we said, like, anything ending in OSE in the ingredients, you can't have that. And so once that's a great question you ask. So once we defined those rules, then we were off.
And now I feel like it's even less success rate based on those rules. Like, nobody passed this thing.
I know.
0%.
I could do it if I didn't
Brittany,
have
what do you
didn't
think?
have honey. I would guess.
No, think about your daily life. Like, because you're a pretty healthy eater. Could you follow all of these rules?
The honey throws me off because that's what I use. I very rarely have refined sugar. And so honey is my sweetener of choice. So in my coffee, I usually put honey. So that would rule me out unless I change my ways, which I think I could do. But, you always think you can do it easier than you can. But I'm going to say 20%.
It's actually surprising. It was 40.
Good.
Nice.
40% got through it. The reasons for, in inverted commas, failure, there was no failure because everybody who participated learned so much about themselves, their ability to change. It was a huge success. And they actually said they're going to completely, radically change the way they communicate with their patients, just from having been through that research. But some of the reasons that they failed were really interesting. The biggest one, well, what do you think? What do you think the number one reason was?
I mean, I feel like it was accidental. I don't think it was
Yeah,
they didn't mean to.
Accidentally eating it and then discovering subsequently that it was
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was up there. A lot of people did that because the labeling is so confusing.
Yeah.
And the sugar industry invent names for sugar every year to keep the public confused. There's now about 70 different names for sugar.
Right.
Diastatic malt. It's like they
I don't even know what that is.
Sugar. And they create all these new names and they put them on ingredients lists. And you're looking at this thinking, what is going on here? And hygienists didn't know what they were.
Yeah.
Patients haven't got a chance.
Yeah, for sure.
The number one reason was addiction. A lot of hygienists weren't aware they were addicted. And then suddenly they started to get all these symptoms after a couple of days, like they're going through cold turkey.
Withdrawal.
Seriously bad symptoms. And they just couldn't cope with it. And they had to keep on having sugar. The ones that were already eating quite a bit of added sugar and managed to quit, they went through the same process, but they came out of the other end. And the changes were phenomenal. One girl, she carried this on for another 3 months after the research, and she's still no added sugar free now. You would not recognize her. She completely changed. She went to see the doctor for a routine appointment, and the doctor said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I quit sugar." And she said, "I need to do some blood tests on you." And she said, "No, I quit sugar." And she said, "No, I'm not having that." And she did all these blood tests.
Yeah.
What does that say about our health system when you get somebody going in that's actually got healthy,
I know.
lost all this weight?
You must be sick. You've lost weight.
There's an underlying
Yeah.
metabolic, yeah.
Doctors just don't see that.
Sure.
So that was really funny. So the addiction was big. And that's the biggest hurdle that we have as clinicians is we don't treat our patients as though they're addicted and we educate them. Addiction is never going to be sorted out if you educate. And then this one blew me away. There was, people offer you sugar all the time. There's feeders. Yeah, you'll come across them throughout this conference.
Yeah.
Do you want a sweetie? We had one yesterday. I'm not going to mention her name. She was here on the booth. And it's when somebody offers you something. Oh, it's a piece of cake. Go on, I made you a cake.
Yeah.
And some people failed because they couldn't resist that.
Yep.
But some people had friends and family who knew they were trying to quit, and they still offered them sugar.
Yeah.
That is a really interesting psychology going on there. That is about power and jealousy.
Yeah.
And as a clinician, when we say to people, "Oh, you need to quit sugar," we have no idea what's going on in their lives. And we don't know when they go home, like I'm going to quit, I want to quit, and then they get home and this person who is living there is a feeder.
Yeah.
and they don't want them to quit because if I can't quit, you're not going to quit. And this whole thing
That
came
is a
out,
messed up psychology.
which is really interesting.
Don't want to look in the mirror about your own actions and
Not ready to address it.
Exactly. That's in a lot of forms of addiction. Yeah, you have your enablers that handle dangle the carrot
Exactly.
or leaving the bowl of M&Ms out.
I have no problem calling out Jessica Atkinson for giving me a Utah mint chocolate thing the other day.
Coming for you,
Shame on you, Jessica. Shame on you.
I hope you're listening.
And
how are
all
you
of-
feeling now?
And exactly. and all of these, she's so nice. She's like, oh, here, we got you this. We brought you all the way from Utah. Anyways, and then, yeah, you're right. You look over at all these booths, and they're trying to attract dental professionals to come look at their wares, and it's, M&Ms, Skittles, whatever,
Yeah.
chewing gum, chocolates.
This happened in UK at a dental conference when I went to in May. I was walking around. There was a candy floss stall. There's people walking around with candy floss and ice creams. Anyway,
Cotton candy, right?
Yep.
That's what we call
Yep.
it?
Correct.
Okay.
so I wrote an open letter to, it was published, asking these companies why they are doing this at these dental conferences.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be interesting to see what kind of happens next year at the same conference.
You haven't gotten any hate mail yet from anybody?
No, I had some interesting, I had some very positive comments. Anyway, let's on that topic of positivity. There were huge successes, and the biggest success in that first piece of research is when one of the participants took it upon herself to create a Facebook group for the people going through the research, so they could support each other.
Mm-hmm.
If you are in that group, you're far more likely to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the seed for the next piece of research. I went away and I read about groups and group behavior, tribal behavior. And there's this lady who's written a book, a huge book about sugar and processed food addiction, Professor Joan Ifland. And as she understands it, going back thousands and thousands of years when we were living in tribes, the biggest fear was getting kicked out of a tribe because you couldn't survive on your own.
Sure.
And that has been embedded in our brains right up to modern day.
Mm-hmm.
And that is more powerful than addiction.
Interesting.
So the fear of getting kicked out of a tribe trumps addiction.
Mm-hmm.
So with my next piece of research, I created a tribe, same participants, and we for 3 months, and we met up regularly to discuss this. And have a guess what the results were then.
So 40% was the first one. I'm going to go higher now. I'm going to go 60%.
So it says 70.
85%.
Wow.
Wonderful.
And that's
I guess I have a very low opinion of human beings. I don't think anyone's going to be successful in this.
But it makes
It's
sense.
interesting.
Yeah, it makes sense. I don't know if I'm getting the numbers exactly right, but there's this concept that if you want to do something, you're 25% likely to do it if you think it in your head, and then you're an additional 50% likely if you write it down, and then you're like 70% likely if I tell somebody else that this is what I'm planning to do. But then if you have that person check up with you, you're even more likely. It's like 85% more likely if you have
Exactly.
that person saying, how is it going? How are you doing? And regularly checking in. So I could see how that group mentality of regular check-in and support, and this is what I'm struggling with, and you lean on each other, how that would help.
That's exactly how it happened. They would go into a supermarket and they were making choices with the tribe in the back of their mind. Like, my tribe doesn't eat that.
Yeah.
And they were making healthy choices. And when these people the feeders, were trying to feed them, they were saying, no, my tribe doesn't eat that. And so they were able to keep this behavior going. And it was phenomenal. But that kind of leads us into how can we bring that into private and general practice as hygienists? And it's simple. We just have to create groups. We have to create groups of people that want to do something, and you put them together. And they'll sort it out themselves.
So let me ask this, because going into a grocery store, it almost feels like everything has sugar in it, though. So how do you? The time commitment's got to be incredible to
Yes.
follow this practice.
Yes. Yes, you're right.
And we're asking people to do that.
Yeah, you have to
don't
plan.
have the time.
You have to plan.
Yeah.
And you cannot shop when you're hungry.
Yeah. That's
Well,
devastating.
yeah, and I imagine I was thinking, it's no surprise to me that the participants lost a significant amount of weight, because I would think by ruling out sugar, naturally you're going to rule out all the other junk that's in food, because if it's got sugar, it probably has a lot of other additives and stabilizers and fillers. So by getting rid of that one thing, you're probably getting rid of a lot of others. And I would imagine it's, they say when you grocery shop, stick to the outer rim. Your fruit, your produce, your milk, your dairy, your meat.
Yep.
If you don't go in the aisles where things are in boxes and bags, you're avoiding processed foods, which usually have sugar in them, and you're turning to those natural sugars.
Sure. Most sugar is tied up in processed and more importantly, ultra-processed foods. I think it's important to differentiate between those two. Because a processed food can actually be healthy. It actually cooking something is a process.
Sure,
So
okay.
that means it's processed.
Yep.
And ultra-processed, that is where you have all the rubbish.
Yep.
And there's more rubbish than actually food. So I call that food-related things. It's not a food. Food-like objects.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most of it's tied in ultra-processed. But 50% of global sugar, added global sugar, is drinks. 25% is cereal. So if you can eliminate cereal and drinks, you've only got 25% left to deal with. So they're the low-hanging fruit. If you're a hygienist, get patients off drinks.
Yeah.
And it's just full of sugar and there's nothing else in them, which is...
So can we talk about drinks that are the diet drinks, the sugar-free drinks that are still,
Well, Tricia and I are currently writing a course on this, and so we've been looking at sweeteners. And that's a whole other area. Essentially, keep it really short, don't have diet drinks because they are potentially just as harmful as sugar. It depends what you want to die of. Do you want to die of heart disease or do you want to die of cancer? And what this is...
Choices. What do I do?
I don't know. Well, how can I say this so I don't get into trouble with the FDA? They approve things like saccharin and aspartame and aspartame, and sucralose. You have that here, sucralose.
Yeah,
We do.
But what they don't do is that they don't test these products in different temperatures. So, for example, sucralose is probably safe if it's at room temperature because that's how they tested it. But if you heat it up, it changes and it releases carcinogens. And sucralose, on their own website, they have recipes. And can you think of any time where you wouldn't heat up sucralose? Because it's usually to put in tea and coffee and stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or it's to bake with.
Right.
And that is quite alarming. Because that stuff is everywhere.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'd rather eat sugar than that stuff.
I know, that's the thing, because I usually use honey, but if I see pure cane sugar, like to me, that is better than, sucralose, fructose, all of those that I'm like, I don't want any of that. Like, at least I know what sugar is, but it's all bad, but you pick your poison, so to speak, because that's really what
you're
it
doing,
is.
yeah. The xylitol, big tick, that's healthy. Not only is that healthy, it's got half the calories of sucrose and it's not as sweet. That's really important because a lot of these things like stevia, where they're kind of neutral because they're natural sugar, so it's not going to give you cancer. But they I think it's 0 calories, but they have an impact in your brain. And so your brain kind of reacts to this. It's so sweet that it starts to create insulin. And it has that impact. So that's really bad. Whereas xylitol is less sweet than sucrose.
So is that approved by your group, xylitol?
Yes. That was And people have had a lot of success with that because they were swapping out sugar for xylitol, baking with it, making jams, and it kills biofilm, breaks
Right.
down biofilm, and it's great for your stomach as well, and erythritol. So they're the natural sweeteners that were positive. So you should, well, I can't give any plugs on here, can I?
Sure you can.
Yeah.
Do
we'll-
whatever you
Spry.
want.
Spry,
Yeah, we just had them on. They work with us. Clear, Spry. They've been on the podcast, for a couple of years now.
They've got a huge range of xylitol products.
So for your individual that wants to use xylitol in their home to bake with it, put it in their tea, coffee, where do they find xylitol in that form? Because I've seen it in, mints and gums and toothpaste and things like that. But if you wanted to get xylitol to use,
Sugar, xylitol sugar, xylitol sweetener, you should
Yeah.
say, yeah. Yeah, you can buy it in any supermarket.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
In the U.S., I'm not sure if that's true in the U.S., but
I imagine that's something you need to order, but
I know you can get it in Whole Foods,
okay, that's good to know.
or
Yeah.
Whole Paycheck, as you guys
I
call
was
it.
going to say, can we afford whole thing?
Yeah. But the cost is, it's more expensive than sugar.
Yeah.
I think it works out. In UK, it works about a penny a gram. So I reckon it's probably about $2.5
Per gram. Just kidding.
for 250 grams. Do
Yeah.
do you have grams here? You do have grams
do.
here.
We
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
but no one uses them.
Okay.
If you bake, you do.
All right.
Standard bag.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I actually did a taste test once. I was delivering a lecture about sugar, and I baked a lot of muffins with xylitol and a lot of muffins with sugar. And I asked people to see if they could identify which was which. And most people got it wrong because I think they assumed that the sweetener would be sweeter than the sugar,
Yeah.
so it's less sweet. And adults actually prefer things less sweet.
Well, and I think that's the effect too. Is if you give up sugar, you talked about the withdrawal symptoms when they were first starting to give up sugar. Once you've given it up, if you start to have sugar again, you feel like you're poisoning yourself.
You do.
have a headache, you're jittery, nausea. It's very apparent that it is doing something to your body. And I know it used to only be for diabetics, but a lot of companies now I see are producing glucose monitors to the general public. So you can see how those foods affect your insulin spikes, and it's fascinating. Things that you don't think are going to jack up your insulin
Yes.
do.
Yes.
I was going to go back to the xylitol thing because I remember there was a controversy. I don't know if this is, this is years ago, but the sourcing of xylitol, like there was some that was better than others. Is there anything that the consumer and or us as dental professionals need to be, coaching our patients to don't get it from this source, but get it from this source?
How to read a label.
I mean, originally, xylitol came from birch bark. That goes back to the Second World War, when sugar was rationed, and the Scandinavians had a vast supply of birch trees, so they just used that. Xylan created the xylitol, and it wasn't until the 1970s that they started to research it, because they suddenly realized that their kids weren't getting tooth decay anymore. So I thought, wow. So the original source is birch bark. So I would always say, if you can get that, then great.
Yeah.
But nowadays, internationally, the major source is corn husks, which I think is brilliant because that's the bit we throw away.
Sure.
So it's being manufactured from that. So the answer to your question, I would say I wouldn't really worry.
Okay. Yeah. Nate was mentioning about the corn husk, and I just I got to thinking about it. I'm like, I know that's what we do here in the U.S. Generally, I would say, because I think it's really hard to find the birch bark sourced one, but wasn't sure there's any other.
I think you'd have to be in Sweden, or that sort of area,
or have it imported. Yeah.
But Brittany, going back to what you were saying about the taste, that was one of the outcomes of the research, is that people were noticing that their taste was changing incredibly. So much so that if they did eat anything sweet, like you said, it was, oh my God, that's terrible.
Right.
But also, they were noticing that their taste was improving. And they were noticing nuances in things that they hadn't previously noticed, like nuts, like pecans. They were noticing the caramelization flavor in that pecan
Yep.
that they'd never picked up before, because suddenly they got this much broader taste.
Yeah.
If your brain keeps telling you to eat sugar, you eat more and more and more sugar, you're losing less and less of your sense of taste. And I think that is one of the things that you have to get over, because you're used to things being so sweet.
Right. Yeah, that real food. I'm on this personal journey right now to try and eat 70% of the food that I consume from within my state or that I've grown myself. I love to garden. And it is, again, through that process, you tend to rule out a lot of processed foods. And I've found that myself, just what flavors you pick up from something that is real, like true real food, minimal ingredients. You can pronounce them all. And yeah, exactly. When you have a homemade cracker versus a cracker from a box, it's very different. I find it doesn't stick to my teeth. My husband went through Invisalign treatment, and a lot of times he would say he lost a ton of weight because he wasn't eating snack foods. He's like, it's not worth it. I'm going to have to go brush my teeth and get an interdental brush to get all that out of my teeth. So he ate a lot of carrots, things that were natural and don't stick to your teeth the way processed foods do or that have sugar.
A lot of potatoes there in Idaho, huh?
Yeah, but don't high glycemic index in potatoes.
Okay, well, let's talk about that, though. So there are still raw foods, whole foods, whatever you want to call them, that are just still not great for you.
Yeah, exactly. And Jim, you probably know more about this than I do, but the carbohydrates and how those turn into sugars,
Sure.
was that something that y'all factored in?
Yeah. Some people tried to go carb-free, and they were much more likely to succeed because, as you say, carbohydrates are sweet, and every carb eventually turns into sugar.
Right.
So, yeah. But it's difficult. It really is difficult. But the more protein you eat, the less carbs you need.
Right.
And it's a complete fallacy that you need carbs. There are so many... we were eating meat when we came out of the trees.
Yeah.
That was our diet. And our brains developed for thousands and thousands of years eating meat. And we only started to really eat loads of carbs when we started to farm and grow crops. And that's when everything started to go wrong in our diets.
Right.
And that's when we started to get unhealthy. So you're right. The less carbs you eat, the healthier you will be. But you have to define carbs. What are carbs?
Right, and there's a wide variety. I mean, off the top of your head, you think, oh, that's bread and pasta. But it's a lot more than that when you start looking at how things factor in. And then there's a calculation you can do for taking fiber and the carbohydrates, and those cancel each other out. So what you subtract whatever your fiber is from the carbohydrates. But it's essentially training your body to where it's going to get its energy from. So it's really, you need to pick one or the other. If you are eating high fat and protein, but also eating carbohydrates, you're likely going to gain weight because your body is still turning sugar from those carbohydrates. But if you do, that's why the ketogenic diet is popular. If you can train your body to pull its energy from fats and protein and eliminate those carbohydrates, it changes how it operates.
Yeah. And you have, if you're a high carb eater, you have to make that switch really slowly.
Right.
Because your body will not be able to deal with, this person suddenly wants to start using fat as an energy source.
Right.
It takes a lot of time to switch. That needs to be done slowly to be healthy as well. But there's a tribe in Finland, well, actually they're northern Finland, Norway and Sweden, called the Sami, and they eat nothing but reindeer. That's their diet.
Wow.
They herd reindeer. There is no word in their dialogue for heart disease.
Oh, interesting.
Gosh, that's fascinating.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And so they're just surviving on that, and they're really healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you don't need carbs.
So what about your personal journey? So you guys did all this research, and when did you start doing this research? How many years ago?
Three years ago.
And so where are you at now personally with all
sugar.
the stuff that you know with sugar?
Well, first of all, I am addicted to sugar. I have periods where I fall off the wagon and start eating sugar. But I generally are quite good at getting back on it again. My biggest downfall is baklava.
Oh.
You know, the
Yeah.
Greek cake with honey and nuts, pistachios.
Yep.
And I go to Cyprus quite a bit, a couple of times a year. I used to live there, and we go on holiday there, and it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And I generally know when I go there, I'm going to be unhealthy for a couple of weeks.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, my personal journey is up and down, but it's generally more on the wagon than off. And I think it's important that we do recognise that addiction is something that you live with for life.
Mm-hmm.
You can just try and have longer, healthier periods. And I reckon if you do that, you'll be okay. And it's important that people that are listening to this, don't beat themselves up if they attempt to quit and they fail. It's not a big issue. It's a learning journey. They're learning, and they're learning about themselves and what works, what doesn't work, and how they can achieve their goal. And it's really important that listeners understand that I am that addict. And most Western people are, because we start feeding our babies quite early on. And it's shocking what manufacturers are putting into baby food. The World Health Organization actually made a statement last year about this. And it's at high levels of sugar in baby food. And the latest research that's come out about this is they know that sugar affects the brain. They know in adults it affects decision making. But they also know that it affects the developing brain. And I just wonder what we're doing to our children that are growing up. I mean, these people will not be, if they're being addicted at an early age, they will not be developing their potential as they could. And we just wander around like zombies, just letting all this happen.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Well, it's the convenience, and I don't have children, so grain of salt, but it's the time as a parent, everything, give them a pouch. Pouches I have 3 older brothers, they all have kids, are very popular with children because you can twist off a top and give it to your child. But like you're saying about the whizzed food, it's already broken down. So it's even a natural, it doesn't have sugar in it, is still going to spike their insulin. But then there's things like juice, and it's very rare that children just drink water, or even milk is sugary.
Milk's okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah, milk's okay.
Good.
Yeah.
I like milk.
I would feel like, though, your taste of the milk, though, would change. Like when I got back from the Philippines, never had, it was also low sugar when I was living there. Came back, I actually couldn't do milk. Like it was too sweet. It was like, this is like a weird. Yeah. It's a weird. Well, also the texture was weird to me, but yeah.
It's lactose. It's a lot of people are, especially in the Asian world, sensitive to it. But that's not a really dangerous sugar. It's got OSE on the end, but the best advice is to go to high-fat milk. The higher the fat content, the better. And in those kind of dairy products, by the time you get to your creams, even healthier. And by the time you get to, I don't know if you have it in America, we have this really dense cream that's thick.
Oh,
and
clotted cream.
And it spreads like butter.
On a scone? I mean, there's
no,
sugar
don't
in
tell
scones.
No, actually, there's no sugar in scones.
Oh, good.
Yeah, no, that isn't part of the recipe.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Good.
So
high tea is going to be great.
So the lower sugar the content goes down and the higher the fat goes up is good. Yeah.
Well, Tim, we could probably talk for ages and ages.
Oh my gosh,
I'm so thankful that you came on. If anyone wanted to reach out to you and maybe learn more about your research and the things that you're doing, how can they reach you? Best is my email, which is tim@ohiouniversity.com. I'll spell that. That's OHEHIR university, all one word, .com. And we'll put that in the show notes for sure. Tim, thanks. It's been a pleasure. I could talk about this all day. I know you can. I know you can.
I could listen to you all day.
Thank you. No, it was great. Anytime.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of 2 hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of 2 hygienists.